Hey guys, if you're actually curious as to what is required basically for someone to stand up and run an information security office or a security team in general, stick around because that's what we're talking about today on our podcast. All right, Brad. So we get asked a lot, right? What does running or standing up or being in a security team actually entail?
Right.
And it is almost always from folks that they're new. Maybe they're a new organization that is in their infancy as far as standing up their process. Or maybe they're new to a role, or they're interested in getting into one of those security roles. They're a little bit more open to actually learning what all is involved so that they know career progression paths and stuff like that. So I felt like that'd be something worth talking about.
Yeah.
I think we all know it's heavily involved with a whole bunch of key elements that are required to make it work, right? So, and we have a list. We're actually a little bit more organized
This time
today than normal. So the first one on the list, right, is planning. Obviously, you have to define scope. You have to define responsibilities. You have to define this is a security team, and this is what their job or their mission is. And I say you have to define that, and industry experts do as well, because one of the things that security teams have the biggest issue with is understanding that security isn't first and foremost for organizations.
Absolutely.
Your job is to secure things in the proper manner per leadership's requirements.
Yeah. Security is certainly an enablement. Our role, our responsibility is to enable the business to do what it needs to do in as secure a fashion as possible. So the first one you mentioned, the planning, that point obviously brought up first. You do want to spell out the strategy, the security strategy for the security team and how it's going to interact with the organization.
How it's going to interact with the organization. That's good.
Yeah. That's tremendously important. Because you don't want security to be the team of no. You can't have that. Like that.
It needs to be no but.
If
you have to say no, it needs to be no
but. Right. And we as security people have to realize the guys in business and even the guys that are in the IT groups, IT teams, they're just trying to do their jobs. So we need to help them do their jobs wherever we can. So if somebody comes to us wanting to do something that's off the wall, we can say, well, there may be a better way to do this. You're trying to open up, I don't know, SMB straight to the internet to share files to somebody in Budapest.
What use case are you truly trying to do?
Yeah.
And how do we do it securely?
And how can we do it so that we don't lose all of our data and end up in the news? Yeah. And I think another point as part of this is the mission. I know a lot of security practitioners don't get into the mission writing business. A lot of times they get into the security practicing business. That's what their jobs are. But knowing what your mission is really key, because then you can take everything that you do and make it aligned to that mission.
Exactly.
So then you know you're doing your job because you're focusing on the mission, and not just your organization's missions, but your security team's mission.
Yeah, because your organization's going to have an overall mission of outreaching the public and blah blah blah, which translates to a very polite way of saying make money, feed the machine. And the security mission needs to enable that, but also it needs to, how do we keep our security practitioners happy, engaged? How do we make sure that they're not burning out? There's a lot more into it.
That's a good point, man. I've never seen a mission that looked back on the team that was supporting the mission.
It's always a community.
Which it would be awesome to have that written in to do the great things in security while not running our security guys off. That could be pretty killer.
Especially, it's a high-stress environment anyway.
It is, yeah.
So the better you can make life for security practitioners, the better your security will be, because turnover is a pain in the ass. and
and
knowledge transfer. And there's just not many of them.
That's a thing. And when you lose good people, they take
good knowledge.
They take there's a phrase that I can't think of, but they take organizational knowledge with them. Institutional knowledge. Yeah. They take that with them, and it takes a while for people to put all those pieces into their mind and figure out what they're doing and how it plays into the overall.
Oh, and it's always more expensive because how many times have we seen just right here at the state, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, organizations we worked for, a good quality engineer gets run out because he was a good quality engineer or she was a good quality engineer, which means they got more work than everyone else. Yeah, and they left and they took their institutional knowledge and then they had to bring in a more expensive resource or two that was able to catch up and redo things. So planning has to be, I mean, what is it? You go into it without a plan, you're going to fail.
You plan to fail. You fail to plan, you plan
What's
to fail.
What's the saying? You know,
if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail.
You plan to fail, exactly. So, and another key point, right, for planning, resources.
Oh, certainly.
Both financial and anytime you're looking, you have to look at salaries because you need humans.
Right.
And then you need other funding specifically for tools and shiny objects that might help you make your life easier. So
yeah, and that's where I've gained a respect for project managers that really understand project management and resourcing a project.
I used to dog them so bad because I was like, why can't you just give me a list and then I just do it? What are you here for? And then you dive into everything a PMO office does.
Right. If you really learn what it is that they do, oh my gosh, it can be as detailed as security work in a lot of cases.
Absolutely, and they're usually having to deal with things that they may not know.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. You know, you're a PMO. You're not a security practitioner. You're not an IT practitioner. How are you going to understand what all's required for a transition? So
right.
Speaking about people and all the jazz that goes in there, team composition, right? And obviously, it's going to vary heavily depending on the organization size, its complexity,
the resources available,
the resources that the business is able to afford to make available. But usually, team composition are, those are your security analysts, your engineers, any type of managers for like a security operations center, et cetera.
Right.
So, I mean, it doesn't have to be overly complex. And that's just operational security unnamed. That's not even considering the GRC side of things, right?
Right. And we do get to some policies and procedures in a minute, but that's not specific to GRC.
But it should definitely be a part of team composition because they're team members.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's like any team, especially any team that's in a high stress role. You got to have folks that first off know what they're doing.
Yes.
You need people with aptitude. Also, you need people that don't hate each other.
I've worked in security groups where I've hated the other people.
It's tough. You can't really get anything done.
I mean, how deep does DNS go?
It's hard. It's hard to get things moving when the pieces or the cogs don't want to work together.
Jive.
Yeah, and I know you're an extrovert. I'm an introvert. We tend to be like IT guys, and then security guys especially tend to be introverts.
We complement each other very well.
Yeah, we do.
But I only make them blush like 100 times a day with stuff that comes out of my mouth.
Yeah. So like a team of introverts, you've got to have a leader in there that can get the introverts interacting with each other.
Yeah.
But that's a key thing is the composition of the group has to be able to function, has to understand their mission, and to be able to work with each other to be able to perform the mission to support the organization's overall mission.
Exactly.
Yeah. And not end up in the news.
Oh yeah, don't end up in the news. There, that saying, there's no such thing as bad publicity. If you're an organization that constantly gets compromised, it might be a bad PR stunt. I read somewhere, I can't remember the article. I'm going to have to look it up so I can post it in the notes. But a hacker group came out and said that they've intruded or compromised or taken advantage of T-Mobile over 200 times in 2022.
Oh my gosh.
And we only heard about the 3.
Right.
Or was it 2? Anyways.
I only remember 2.
Because there was one in like August and there was another one in November. Those are the ones that were public. But these guys are like, yeah, we've been in there all year, 200 plus.
But I wonder what that means. I'd like for them to define in there. I wonder what that actually means.
Well, I mean, an incident is
Yeah.
compromising an incident
Depends
is
on how you
defined by the
define it, right.
organization. But usually, to the layman, an incident is, they got in and they have
When they access data
access
they
to
weren't
our
supposed
stuff
to.
they shouldn't. Right.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
team complexity, security analysts, engineers, managers. Then you have your
leadership.
ISSOs, your ISSMs,
Yeah.
your
Which those
auditors.
Those tend to live more on the compliance side. The ISOs and ISSMs tend to live on the compliance side, which they would end up working with the security operations team
Right.
to make sure that their compliance is being met.
I mean, so you got the GRC side that
Mhm.
does mountains upon mountains of paperwork.
Yeah.
So they're stressed out from making sure all the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed.
Yeah. Eyes are crossed.
And then they have
T's
to go
dotted, yeah.
audit, and people hate them because they're the
They
ones
do.
auditing them. You walk into a room as a GRC guy, you're like, shit.
Everybody clams up. Yeah.
So at the state, at OIT,
Mm-hmm.
people loved seeing me in the hallway because that means I was out walking around socializing.
But hated when.
But if I called them, you could hear them go, like they drew up within themselves and left a nub in their seat because they assumed I was going to bring them bad news or something like that. So they hate the GRC side.
well,
Which
yeah.
transitions. You go ahead.
So yeah, but it does transition. So the GRC side of things, I know a lot of professionals, like IT professionals, that working on GRC, like documentation and stuff like that, is just sheer anger.
A lot of frustrated.
That's the responses they get is, I don't have time for this.
Exactly. Oh, I thought you were talking about them.
Who, the GRC guys?
GRC
No,
guys
I'm talking
get
about
angry
the IT guys. I've seen like, so for instance, a federal agency showed up to audit a state agency, and the guys that were the network engineers at the state agency, like,
They're already drowning under work.
Right. I mean, they're a skeleton crew anyway. So I come in there and I'm like, okay, we need 4 weeks worth of documentation from you guys. I don't know.
Pen the paper.
Right.
I mean, you cannot do your stuff otherwise.
Right. But so to help with that a little bit, go ahead and have your policies and which the next bullet point is policies and procedures. Go ahead and have your policies and procedures developed, because the policies are your pre-decisions. Like the organization or the leadership of the security team makes the decision what the policies, what the mindsets for the team, what those are going to be, and then the team has to in turn develop procedures that can support those policies.
And the beautiful thing about that is, if your policy says that you have to have certain things documented a certain way and they're compliant to the policy, when your auditor shows up, the IT people won't be so angry. Because they should, in theory, just be able to go, here you go.
Yeah, it's done. Yeah.
That's where communication and various other avenues of human engineering or interaction come into play.
Yeah.
No one wants to document. They're always so busy.
They
but if
don't.
they did it once.
Well, and I found too that a lot of GRC, so the successful GRC guys, first off, they all want to jump off a roof, but
they cannot fly.
They can understand what the technologists are doing well enough to go ahead and write it up for them, and then just say, okay, this is kind of what I have. Is that right? And then the IT guys can go back and say, no, we do it this way. But having your policies documented so that you know what your pre-decisions are, and then having your procedures documented so that you know what it is that you're doing, that stuff helps you in the day-to-day. Of course, it also helps when auditors show up, but I don't really feel like we need to be doing things just to pass audits. We need to be doing things to mature our organization. And again, we have that as a bullet point later. We'll get to that.
Well, because they want to check boxes and we want to make sure it's done right.
Right. We want to stay out of the news, yeah.
I mean, I want to check boxes as well, but I want it done right.
And that's to get the auditors off our backs, because in my opinion, auditors, they really are a waste of time. Assessors, that's where it's at. That's where the benefit comes.
Because people lie to auditors.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be brutally honest with an assessor.
Well, you want to pass audits and you want to grow from assessments.
Yes.
Yeah, assessors are on your side, auditors are not.
So what, obviously we believe in 853.
Yeah,
and
that's
RMF for our basic
right.
security. What should you document in policy? If let's say you're completely ignorant to any of the security frameworks, in which case you need to watch episode 9, which is exactly what we talked about.
A lot.
What type of things need to be
Well,
policy and procedurized, if you will?
Of course, you know I'm a huge fan of 53. So anytime there's an opportunity to pull a framework into the conversation, I'm going to go to that. Of course, you need an incident response set of policies and procedures, and that should include how what your incident response capability is, what it looks like, kind of what you do day to day, and it should get into scenario specific processes or procedures. So if a phishing email comes in that's unsuccessful, this is what we do. Like if it gets caught by the user, this is what we do. If a phishing email comes in that's not caught by the user and it actually compromises credentials or something like that, this is what we do.
Hopefully we have MFA, but this is what we do.
Right, but all the steps about those specific scenarios, if malware lands on a device, what do we do? Step by step, start to finish.
Full
all
remediation.
Those things. Right, and every bit of them should be documented within an incident tracking system of some sort. I do a lot of things in SharePoint lists, which isn't the greatest, but it's something you can have up and running in minutes.
It's good for you because you know it.
Yeah, I know it, and I can have it up and running in minutes. It's quick.
See, I like things like ServiceNow because you can build tasks, you can build workflows, you can do all that.
You can.
But just like SharePoint, like you're good at SharePoint, I'm good at ServiceNow. They both require a lift for people that don't know them.
Yeah, they do.
There's a learning curve.
Right.
So,
and anything's going to have that. Any new tool is going to have that. Any new process is going to have that. And the process, you should expect to adjust your processes as you're working through them so that you mature them and make them fit with your organization better. As long as the end goal is still being met, update the processes.
What about security training?
So specific
if
to...
the user finds the phishing, you need to pat them on the back, give them a
heck
cookie because they're quick. I want that $5 off from the Irish Bread Pub for their 25th anniversary. Never mind the fact that company was only open for 5 years.
It's been closed down. Right. So, specific to the security operations team, I do think there should be, which is part of the 853 framework, I forget exactly what the control is named, but it talks about the betterment of the security resources, continuous education for the
and
security
everyone
resources.
is a security resource at an organization.
Yeah,
in some way.
Everybody's got their security responsibilities. So specific to the security team, I would suggest things like incident response training. First off, generic, but then also specific to your organization.
Tabletops, man.
Right? Yeah.
That way, when it hits the fan, you don't see a bunch of bug-eyed individuals freaking out.
Right.
So.
Right.
Absolutely.
And also the type of training that would go into CPEs for certifications and things like that, I would suggest looking into those. For government employees, Fed VTE is awesome. It's a little dry at some points, but it
is very dry at all points.
It's got tons of really good, useful information in it, though.
That is very true.
What's the other one? I love Cyberary.
Cyberary, yeah.
Cyberary is rocking. The costs have gone up for Cyberary in the past couple of years.
Inflation, man.
Yeah, no, they got to
building back better.
We got to feed kids and whatnot. Building back better.
Training kids.
So the next one, beyond security awareness training, I would honestly probably swap. I would start with a risk assessment to understand where the organization's risks are. So NIST 800-30, the assessment that goes, the assessment that 800-30 describes, assesses against adversarial and non-adversarial scenarios. So basically, you'd go through a risk assessment and figure out what risks apply to your organization, and then you focus your resources on those risks initially.
Absolutely.
Let me think. So the other things we've come up with quickly was like access control policies and procedures and things like that.
Yeah, because that's the first thing you see. Who can get in the building? Who has an account to a system? What level of access should they have for each?
And do all the resources in the network, do they all need to communicate with everybody over all ports at all times?
Yeah, man. All allow all.
Yes, it
we don't need a
works.
firewall. We need a router with no ACLs.
Heck yeah, dude. Heck yeah, man. I love /8s in the network.
That kind of gives us a pretty groovy transition into tools and technologies, right? Because firewalls are one.
Yeah.
So, I like to call tools and technologies when it comes to information security the shiny object, because everyone has a new tool that's going to make your life awesome, right? It's the new shiny object. Squirrel, I'm going. they're almost always outrageously expensive because cybersecurity is a big deal. But you have things like you have firewalls, you have IPS systems, you have EDRs, you have SIEMs,
Yep.
SIEMs, however you say that, logging in general. So there's a lot that can happen. Because obviously a team needs various tools and technologies to monitor and secure, right?
Yeah.
So, and I usually don't include AV or anything like that. I think security teams should help drive the decision on which AV to use, but I don't think they should manage it by any means. Maybe audit it. But from like an operational security team, firewalls, you're usually going to have a boundary team.
Right.
So you need quality firewalls. Me personally, I believe in Fortinet, FortiGates, and Palo Alto Networks, Palo Altos, because those are the two industry leaders for next-gen firewalls.
Yep.
Cisco and SonicWall can eat a bag. Next up, you have intrusion prevention.
That's 3 from you, by the way.
Yeah. So you have firewalls that can do IPS, but if you wanted to do it separately, you're looking at things like tipping points, which I think they're with Trend Micro. Back when we used them, they were with HP. I think they got acquired as a business unit, though. Or I might be wrong.
They're with Trend Micro now, yeah.
They do a good job.
I still like the name of that line that we used back in the day, the 5200 NXs. Called them Dragons.
Dragons.
Yeah.
And if you were good at it, you were the Dragon Master.
The Dragon Master.
One. So, but security tools are almost always an arm and a leg.
Yeah.
But there are options, right? There are open source options that you've been playing with a good bit lately. Tell us what you've seen just in your brief, and we're in our infancy. We're standing up some open source tools specifically to help organizations that are limited by financial
constraints.
funding. They have financial constraints. They just cannot buy an $800,000 1 terabyte a day ingestion point for Splunk. Now, granted, they don't need a terabyte a day, but from a SIEM point of view, you have ArcSight, QRadar, Logarithm, and Splunk, and all of them are expensive as hell unless you go with something like Devo, which is clever. So, which ones have you been playing with from an open source standpoint, and how you feeling about them? Like, I know it's brand new. You stood up the VM yesterday.
I spent the past week.
Benefits.
I spent the past week working on some open source tools, and I've dabbled in them before, which I would call what I've done this week dabbling in these technologies. I spun up an instance of the Elastic Stack, which
Elk is a workhorse, but I swear. This is my only complaint with open source vendor. I swear they make it as difficult as possible because it's some nerd looking at whatever code that they're using for their source code in their mom's basement.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make this as difficult as possible so that I'm the only one.
I like how you just adjusted your glasses just then.
Yeah, I don't have glasses, but you do.
Yeah, I just adjusted
But you never
them
have
too.
to adjust them. You did?
From the side. It's way less nerdy when it's from the side.
You got to push it up.
No.
But they're not thick frame.
I don't have the tape there to keep.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
No, Elastic is killer. It's enormous, and it can do anything that a log aggregation tool can do. But I don't know how to speak it. I got my Elastic instance with Kibana presenting the web front end for it. I got file beats sending it data.
What are these things? You're like
Goodness
naming
gracious,
things that
man.
might not be.
So Elastic is kind of the search engine in the back end.
It's the indexer.
Yeah.
If you're used to Splunk, it's the indexer. I have to relate it to Splunk because that's what I.
And I'm not well versed in Splunk by any means. But that's where the data kind of lives. That's how you interact with the data. The presentation of the data happens in Kibana. That's the
GUI.
That's the GUI. That's the web front end that users interact with. Logstash can take data streams and feed it into Elastic, which then Kibana presents.
So that's kind of like your syslog ingestion and
yeah. And then the beats, the different beats. There's a file beats. There's winlog beats. There's just that's the agents that tend to run on the endpoints that report back to Elastic, sometimes through Logstash. It's just It's a lot. I got them working. But when I got
you even got a little sample data in there.
yeah. So I got an OpenVAS report dumped into it. I was trying to get a good visualizations built on vulnerability reports. Man, I got nothing. Like I can click through it and I can do things. I can make the data, the dashboards change, but it's pulling teeth to make.
I am not a Linux admin by any means, but I was able to get Splunk running in an all-in-one instance on Linux by myself and on Windows. I stood up a Proxmox cluster at my house and then proceeded to try to stand up Elastic Logstash and Kibana, the whole Elk stack, or the Elastic stack that they call it.
Yeah, they
now.
changed it to Elastic Stack. Yeah.
And brother,
Dude,
almost threw that server out damn window.
it's a tough one, man. It's a tough one. So yeah, the next one that I spent some time on was the Security Onion, and it's
which runs on those. It has Kibana in it.
yeah,
in
it's
some
all
fashion.
that's all
Elastic.
built into it. Yeah. It's
Which Security Onion isn't necessarily a like a log ingestion type thing. It uses log ingestion software to run other use cases.
right. It's more intended to be kind of a oh my gosh, like a security centralization point. Like you can send all of your IPS and IDS logs to it. You can send host agent logs to it, and then interact with that in like a SOC capability for incident response.
It's got case management built in.
Yes, it does, and it's pretty killer too. How you can graduate an alert into the case management and then work the case and close it out. That's cool. I like how that worked. It's kind of I don't want to say static, but it was hard to.
That's what she said.
It was. What am I trying to say? So it was difficult. So it was difficult to get a decent cadence to it. I kind of had to go back to start a lot to get where I was trying to head. Like pivoting from one location to another was difficult for me to get my brain wrapped around.
So maybe it just needs a little intuitive redesign.
Or training. I mean, I probably just needed training. Yeah, it's the keyboard error, PEBCAC. Yeah,
problem exists between keyboard and chair, my man.
No, that's totally it. So then the last one that I stood up, the latest one that I stood up was a Wazoo instance.
I like Wazoo.
I
stood up a cloud instance.
I like it too. I actually like the on-prem instance better than the cloud.
Oh, yeah?
It was easier to get the agents into it, but I'm not sure if you can take an on-prem instance of Wazoo and present it to the internet for remote users to.
Oh, you totally can.
I don't know if it's a good idea.
You can let it use FQDN with SSL encryption.
Yeah.
Because I played with Wazoo.
Right, and I know that you can. I don't know if the service that's listening is secure enough to publish out to the internet. That's what I'm getting at.
Are any of them?
You know, being
really?
a security guy, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I like Wazoo. I like the ideas behind it. So I think that it could be a tool that could be really, really useful, especially in an EDR use case, I guess.
Yeah, because, I mean, like, Forti EDR is expensive as hell.
Mm-hmm.
All the managed or XDR or EDR platforms tend to be a little high.
Right.
CrowdStrike is pretty decent on their pricing, but you have to have a decent number of agents for it to really pop. Right. So.
Right. Yeah, but so Wazoo was working really well. I'll probably spend more time in it, but you've got to get it to automate some of the quarantining functions. You've got to get it integrated with things like the Windows firewall and like Linux IP tables, that kind of a thing, to automate quarantine so that you can stop a machine, you can stop malicious activity from spreading throughout your network quickly without having to go put hands on every machine that's been impacted. Anyway, so that's just some of the things I've goofed with this week. The open source community has come a tremendously long ways. Like since I started working in open source, I've been using Linux since like 96, 97.
You know why? You know why it's come so far? Because back then the only people using Linux were the uber nerds. Yeah. And then you have people like us, or you got people a lot smarter than us. They got tired of paying the astronomical prices, and they're like, well, let's go open source. Okay, well, you know, there's a lot of limitations. It's either not very easy to deploy, not very easy to use, or there's a lot of knowledge-driven stuff that we just can't consume. Yeah. And it's like, well, let's hire some people that can make it simple.
And they have, and they've done that.
So they hire people to make it simple. It's like, you contribute to the community. We use it as this resource. and they pay their salary and keep them going. So
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of these companies that stand this stuff up. Security Onion and Wazoo, for instance, they have services that they'll provide. Well, they'll come in and they'll stand up your instances of these technologies.
quality professional services.
Yeah, and they're killer, and they can get you up and running in a heartbeat. My only fear is when it breaks.
Which is easy to do. If it's a vehicle with wheels, I can wreck it. If it is a Linux box with anything running on it that's mission critical, I can
break a
it.
dependency. Yeah.
Oh man, I shouldn't have apt-get updated or whatever on that one.
Yep.
So, well, cool. Yeah. So we just rattled off a whole bunch of different tools.
Stuff, yeah.
Some were open source, some were closed source, which is why there's always that shiny thing, right? So, but yeah, there's always a tool that can allegedly make your life perfect. They never do, so don't fall for it.
There's never a silver bullet.
So, which brings us into risk management, because that's what helps you decide which tool you actually need to spend the money on or how much you need to resource into it.
Right. So I mentioned risk management, risk assessments, and talking about policies and procedures. I think you may have an industry that tells you what your security requirements have to be, but if if your security requirements are kind of open-ended, it wouldn't hurt to start everything off with a good, solid, honest risk assessment. And
emphasis on honest.
Honest, yeah.
You're always honest with the assessor. You're honest with the auditor. But the company is trying to pass the audit, so they're not as forthcoming as they should be in those situations.
Well, in an audit, you just answer the question.
Never expand.
Because you're trying to pass it. In an assessment, drown the assessor in information, because the assessor can help you find places to mature. But so again, with risk management, a risk management program and strategy would make things like risk assessments a normal part of the organization, to where they happen cyclically, so that you can measure where you started versus where you are year to year.
Progression path.
Right. And there may be things that change year to year. So like 10 years ago when we were doing risk assessments, we would answer pandemic questions like, it's a low risk. But now, holy crap, it was real and it happened.
Set it loose from Wuhan.
Yeah, so now we got to develop processes on what do we do when we get sent home for a year. But stuff like that, because things do change. So
that was a curveball.
That was a curveball that most of us weren't expecting.
I lost 50 pounds, man, because I was bored, so I went out and exercised.
Really?
Every pound I lost, I gave to someone, apparently, because a lot of people gained a lot of weight.
Dude, the last thing I was bored. Goodness gracious, that was such a busy time. But that's my point with this bullet, is a risk management strategy with a risk management program that lets you assess risks on a regular basis, so that you can adjust on things that are changing. If you've matured an area, maybe you find a new area of risk that you need to get focused on, so you can focus your security resources on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which kind of brings us to training and awareness. We touched on it with policies and procedures, because security awareness training is kind of a big deal from an organizational standpoint. But training and awareness, and you made mention, training the security team, providing them continuing education.
Yeah, so what's the
You're
joke?
a firewall guy? Why are you going to just only focus on firewalls? Do more.
Yeah.
Learn more.
Well, you can learn something else that may help you do your firewall job way better.
Yeah, if you understand why that server is so busted.
Right.
You can do more.
Right. And there's the phrase that, why would you want to, or what happens if you train up your team and then they get a job somewhere else? And then the response to that is, well, what if you don't train them and they stay? I think that's hilarious.
You don't need a potato.
Right.
Just sitting there growing roots.
And that stuff does happen. But keeping your security team aware of changes in the industry is key.
Critical.
In IT, absolutely, but especially security, because the security landscape changes daily. I mean, by the hour, stuff is going on. So I won't spend too much time on it, but it's key to train your guys.
Now, if you go back to bullet 3, policies and procedures, an incident response should be easy, right? There's an incident response team sometimes, or sometimes it's just a team that's made up of people that are already within the organization. Yeah,
and that's what I see in most organizations, is the people that are subject matter experts in certain roles are parts of the incident response team, because the guy that leads the incident response activities for the organization, which often is the CISO. If a big incident happens, he's got to pull in all these SMEs that can help perform the incident response
And
function.
one of those SMEs is usually going to be a resume writing professional.
Oh, man.
Because we call them resume generating events.
RGEs, yeah.
You can do everything right. You get compromised. They got to have someone fall on the sword, right?
Yeah, and we had a change in that trajectory a few years ago where they stopped firing CISOs every time something was
Because you run
breached.
out of CISOs.
Well, right. plus you fire the dude that just went through and survived
the event.
This incident. Yeah.
If
Now
anything,
he's got
he's
this
more
experience.
versed.
Right. Which often the CISOs, often a breach or an incident like that is either a procedural fail or a technology fail, both of which the CISO isn't directly over most of the time. If a phishing email is successful and the secretary clicks on the invoice link and breaks out malware across the organization, yeah, we need to have the EDR tools in place to stop it before it gets too wide. But that secretary clicking that link, it's not the CISO's fault.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
They like to kick us when we're down, though.
They do, yeah, they do. But a good incident response capability, a good incident response plan that documents at like the high level what's expected to happen in the middle of an incident, as far as here's where all the tools live, here are the people that are on the incident response team, here are your reporting requirements and timelines. And of course, here's what the definition of an incident is to us. All that's key, so that when you're in the middle of the moment, you don't have to stop and go, "What do I do now?" We're at this point. What do I do?
You have the process; it's all stepped out for you, so you're good.
Right, and to step back up to training and awareness for just a minute, training on your incident response plan and your incident response capability is key in helping the SMEs that are IR resources know what their role is.
Especially if you bring in outside resources. You're like, your role is this. You're going to be the data jockey. You're going to get everything, get the chain of custody, blah, blah, blah. Here's your steps. Follow this. Because they're not familiar with your organization. They have to have guidance. Right. Which then, of course, brings us to our last bullet, and it's continuous improvement. Yeah. Which we've hampered on continuously, so we may not even need... If you're not first, you're last. But if you're not getting better, you're dumb.
What is the...
Or if you're not improving your brain, the moment you stop learning new things, man, it's when you kind of fall off.
Yeah, if like the shark, if it's not moving forward, it's dying.
It's belly up.
Yeah. This bullet point means grow all the time, mature at every opportunity, either through the other like risk management processes or security control reviews, that kind of a thing, or in your training. If you learn something new, work it into the processes. Especially if it makes life better. Yeah. And the reason it's called continuous improvement is because it's all day, every day. Like little bitty things can add up to great gains. Absolutely. Yeah. So there is a plethora of things that go into either being a part of, running, or standing up an information security team. Right. A lot of things to be considered, not only by you if you're the person standing it up, but your leadership, the board, the CEO, CIO. And the daggum secretary that's clicking the invoice, yeah. It's always the invoice. So, but yeah. Hopefully our long diatribe about what it is to stand up an information security office and what all's involved has provided you some benefit. Do us a solid. Post your comments below because we're curious as to hardships and things that you guys, or bullet points that you may see as critical from your own perspective when it comes to doing this. Yeah, maybe things we missed or something like that, yeah. And then, of course, hit like and subscribe because we love you and you need to love us so that we can get our word out better. Thank you for watching, and remember, security is achievable.